Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Skipbound, and this is the latest episode of Top 5 Weekly, where I have my two cohorts in crime who have been on the show for quite a few weeks now. I couldn't do it without them. We had a special guest tonight, but something's going on with my
Kurt Russell.
We're talking about Kurt Russell in honor of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and actually Kurt Russell was in Fast and the Furious 8, Fate of the Eight, a couple weeks ago. So we're kind of wrapping old Kurt Russell into Top 5 Weekly this week. I think he deserves a Top 5 week. What a great filmography this guy has. He's done so many different genre films and all kinds of different kinds of films, comedies and action adventures. So we'll see what these guys, usually these guys surprise me sometimes with one or two of their picks. So hopefully one of them, I know pretty much most of Kurt Russell's filmography, but maybe these guys will pick something that I didn't expect. Hopefully they didn't pick anything crappy. But let's start with Andrew. Introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew. I am back here once again to talk about Kurt Russell. It's very interesting that you don't realize how long Kurt Russell has been around in movies. He just always tends to be here. And it's not like he's a big movie star in the sense like he's been in all these big movies and Oscar award winners and blockbusters. He's just always been working in movies. He's very much a working actor, if you will, someone who's just constantly working. It's also nice to see that recently he got a star on a Hollywood Walk of Fame along with his wife, Goldie Hawn. So it was really nice to see that, and I wonder why it took so damn long for him to get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's been acting since the 70s, so that's 40 years of acting, off and on. He doesn't have, arguably, he could have a similar kind of great filmography as a Scorsese, a Pacino or De Niro or Hoffman, but he just does a little bit different kind of film than those guys. All right, and my other panelist this evening is Mr. Stephen Billings. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Stephen Billings, and we're talking a guy with maybe the most charisma. One of these guys that has, he's the guy, he's one of these 80s action stars. He's got like some of the best charisma out of any actor I've ever seen. He's up there with the Stallones, and to me, he is one of these guys from the 80s action stars that really is a standout, and actually is more on the Stallone side, actually a decent actor. He's not just an action guy. He has a little bit more than just his charisma to back it up. So it's like he's a very interesting actor. Like Dan said, he's done comedy, he's done action, he's done some TV in his early work. He's a really cool dude, and to me he's one of these guys. You look at him and you just think America, just America, So yeah, America. I can't wait to talk about him.
America. And last week I believe Andrew went first, so this week it's Steven's turn to go first.
Yes.
So, right. Steven, what is your number 5?
All right, so my number 5, I decided to use this one as a personal favorite. One that I watched, in my teens. So now you know that it's an earlier movie. He's not the star of this movie, but he is a very important part, and he just brings that America to it, and that is Sky High. He plays the dad, the main dad of the kid in this movie. I cannot, for some reason, remember. I should have looked it up. Actually, this was a last-minute switch. I would have looked up his character name. But, yeah, he plays that just – you would want him to be a superhero. I kind of would like to see him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I feel like he would fit. He just plays the dad of the main kid, and he's just, there, hoping he has powers, and he doesn't have powers, and he's just like, oh, I'm with you. He plays perfectly a superhero in this movie. It's not a big time acting role or anything like that. And like I said, he's not the star, but I really loved his charisma. I really loved it's more of a family film. You don't see a lot of family films from Kurt Russell. So this was kind of This is one him and John Travolta's wife, Presley, or isn't that her last name? Jamie Presley. She's freaking smoking. So yeah, it's just good. It's a fun movie. Watch it. I think it's on Netflix.
Yeah, I enjoyed it when I was a kid. You're absolutely. I mean, I was in my mid-20s.
You were a kid then?
I was what I am now. I was a kid about. It's about what 20 years ago. That thing came out 15 years ago.
Maybe a little like 15 years.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a while ago. I enjoyed it. It was a fun little film. I mean, it wasn't trying to do anything anything fancy or big time. It was what it was, and I enjoyed it for that. All right, Andrew, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is kind of an underrated film when it comes to just a film in general, and I think as a Kurt Russell film. And I'm going to go with Ron Howard's Backdraft, because it's a film that doesn't get talked about enough. So I figured I might as well put it at my number 5. For those of you not familiar with this film, Kurt Russell and Billy Baldwin play a firefighter brother duo who don't really get along that well, but they have to work together because there is an arsonist who is creating all kinds of fire and creating all kinds of problems. And it's a really good film that kind of highlights the dangers of being a firefighter, specifically when it comes to the idea of the backdraft, where it's something you can't control and it's something that can be extremely deadly. And it's a really good, solid, underrated film, and I really enjoyed it when I watched it. And I'm always a big fan of Ron Howard. I mean, I've always followed his work. I've always liked him. Even when his films are not great, I still find some type of silver lining in them. But yeah, I'm gonna go. My number 5 is Backdraft.
Very good choice. I debated whether I should put it on my list, but I thought to myself, I have a sneaking suspicion somebody on the panel might have that on their list.
Yeah, it was a last-second switch with me. I had something else at 5, and I'm like, you know what? Backdraft doesn't get talked about enough, so you might as well put it up there to maybe somebody out there will be interested in seeing it.
Oh, just great. Robert De Niro is kind of like a mentor character, and it's got President Snow,
Donald Sutherland.
It's got a great cast.
Scene in the movie that almost steals the whole movie. It's very interesting, his description of fire and the kind of anthropomorphic type identity that fire has. It's really, really a fantastic scene.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Very good choices for number 5, guys. My number 5 is a film a lot of people might attribute towards Meryl Streep, but Meryl Streep had to act opposite somebody and who had to carry the weight of what was going on in this film with her. And I'll tell you what, I saw this 40 years ago when I was a kid, and I try to revisit it every so often if I'm doing like binge marathons or something like that. And that's Silkwood. Kurt Russell plays basically the boyfriend of Meryl Streep's Karen Silkwood. His name is Drew Stevens in the film, and she's trying to get kind of like rights to people. She's trying to give these people benefits and try to get them safety, kind of stuff like that, make sure they're in a safe working environment. And come to find out, she got exposed to hazardous waste, radiation, and so she gets. And there's this whole deal with Kurt Russell, because he's going to live with her, he's going to help her with this fight that she's going through. And I'll tell you what, this is a heavy role for Kurt Russell. When he wasn't doing a lot of these kind of heavy roles, he was kind of doing these more Disney movies or the action kind of things. He wasn't doing these real dramatic roles. And as Drew Stevens opposite Meryl Streep, you got to bring it every day when you're on set. And I really do believe he gives a great performance in this film. And so that's why I put his Drew Stevenson's performance in Silkwood, which came out in 1981, as my number 5. All right, back to you, number 4.
And number 4, this is one that I think does not get really any attention at all. It's one that, to me, he gives one of his best performances, and I think it's just a very cool small movie, and it's called Breakdown. Breakdown to me it kind of reminds me of I'm almost like it could be like a Hitchcockian type of thriller. It's a very small movie. It's about Kurt Russell plays this guy. He's with his wife. They're moving to another state, but they're driving across country, and their car breaks down in the desert, and so he goes to try to get get help, and when he comes back, his wife's missing. She'd been picked up by a truck driver, and then basically it goes into this whole kind of mysterious thing around her kidnapping, and it's a very just tense movie, and it's some of Kurt Russell's best acting, I think, and it's like I said, under the radar. It's not a movie many people have probably even heard of, and I think more people need to watch it. Here it is right here, Breakdown. Check it out. It's a really cool movie.
Yeah, I never heard of it. See, that's one of the good things about doing the show that I like to do. The shows, you get to bring up movies that people may not have heard of, and even some of us, the people on the panel, may not have heard of the film. It's usually me that hasn't heard of something, but I don't know. I heard of quite a few. But good choice, Stephen. All right, Andrew, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is not what one would call a Kurt Russell movie, but he is in it. He's in a smaller role. I think he's in a vital role, and every time he's on screen, I've thought he was very, very good, and that is Vanilla Sky. Yes, this is a Tom Cruise film. It's directed by Cameron Crowe. Dan, you're giving me a funny face there. But it's a film that I had just watched last night, and I think it's a brilliant, brilliant film. And I thought the scenes with Kurt Russell and Tom Cruise were very, very interesting, especially as the film goes on and certain revelations come to light. You understand what the Kurt Russell character represents, what he is to the Tom Cruise character, and it kind of sheds a whole new perspective on their interaction, a whole new perspective on their relationship. And I really found myself extremely engrossed in this film. I know it's a film that is not controversial in any way, but I'd say some people like it, some people hate it. I'm one of the people who really, really like it. I would say I love the film, and I do highly recommend watching the film. Not just because it's a Kurt Russell film, just because I think it's a great film in general. But yeah, that's my number 4. It's unconventional, but I figured I would talk about it today, some way, shape, or form. And now that it's out there, Dan can't take it away from me. So yes,
To the man.
Solid show with that choice. Unbelievable.
Be bold, Dan. Be bold.
Oh my God, unbelievable. All right, so my number 4 is a film that I'll tell you what, I absolutely love this film. Then it spawned a couple TV shows, and it's called Stargate. Stargate with I'll tell you what, it's a Kurt Russell plays Army Colonel Jack O'Neill, and he's opposite James Spader, and they have to go to this kind of like through this Stargate, and they go to this like ancient world on another planet ruled by this Egyptian god-like guy named Ra, and they try to turn the people against Ra, and obviously Ra came to this planet, and he kind of got the Egypt to worship him and so forth, and they did the pyramids and all that kind of stuff on this. But this is one of the few Roland Emmerich films that I can actually recommend. This guy has not made a lot of good films, but this one is a really good film. And there's a talk about a remake of this. I'll be interested to see what they do with it. But I mean, they're remaking everything. So or not, they're going to do it, you know. But Kurt Russell is great in this opposite James Spader. And it's one of the better sci-fi films of the last 25 years. I mean, there really has been a lot of great sci-fi, but this is one of the best ones. It was an original idea at the time, so I absolutely love Stargate on my number 4. All right, we're going back to Steven with his number 3.
My number 3. This one is kind of like a quintessential Kurt Russell movie for me. It's a movie that it's just one that I actually I grew up watching a lot. It's kind of another one, or kind of the two that I really watched a lot growing up. And it's also another, you know, kind of against type in a way kind of role for him, and that is Overboard. Overboard, it's more of a romance type of movie, romantic comedy, whatever you want to call it. But it stars him and his now wife, Goldie Hawn. She basically, the movie's about Goldie Hawn plays kind of this bitch that has, you know, rich bitch, if you want to call her that. And she gets amnesia. She falls off the boat that Kurt Russell was actually working on. And, you know, then, you know, Kurt Russell finds her later with amnesia and basically kind of just slowly starts to fall in love with her. He takes care of her, starts to fall in love with her, see the real her. And, you know, he also has a bunch of kids, I guess, with an ex that he takes care of. They're all a bunch of little rascals, whatever you call them. And it's a good, sweet, fun, romantic comedy type of movie. And and you know, you really get that charm from Kurt Russell. And it's just a really fun, it's a fun movie. It's a funny movie. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the, like I said, quintessential Kurt Russell films for me that you have to check out. So, and it's also directed by Gary Marshall, who did pass away last year. He's the guy that also did Pretty Woman, and so he's a good director. And yeah, so.
No, I mean, this, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the film that they got their romance going together with each other, Overboard, and you know. It's hard to have long-lasting romances in Hollywood. These guys have been married quite a long time in Hollywood, which is a very hard thing to do. You know, so good job for Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell. And Overboard is an underrated comedy. It is a funny film. There's talk of a remake of that. You know, they're going to kind of switch it where the girl is, the guy falls over and the girl saves him. That's what they're talking about, switching it. But, all right, Andrew, what is your number 3?
Okay. Now that I got my 2 kind of interesting picks done, I'm going to go with more traditional Kurt Russell. I'm going to go with Tombstone. This film came out in 1993. It was directed by a director who probably not a lot of people know, is George P. Cosmatos. He did like First Blood Part 2 and Cobra with Sly Stallone. But this film is about Wyatt Earp and his brothers and kind of the shootout at the OK Corral. And Kurt Russell plays not the title character, but the main character, Wyatt Earp. Val Kilmer is in the film as well, and one of his best roles and best performances I think he ever did, and that is as Doc Holliday. Just a fantastic performance by him. The late Bill Paxton plays one of his brothers, and Sam Elliott plays another part in the film. And it's a really good, not modern Western, but it's a film that is a really good Western that came out in kind of the post-classical, post-modern Western genre. And it's one of his best performances, in my opinion. Kind of the best performance he's done in the last, 25 years or so. And what everybody remembers him for in this film is having this great facial hair, something that he would reprise in Quentin Tarantino's Hateful Eight. Once again, this kind of wild facial hair. It's a really good Western. I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it. Kind of do a double feature with Unforgiven, which came out around the same time. Kind of 2 really great Westerns in the early 90s. That I highly recommend. And this is Kurt Russell being kind of a Western badass. You know what I mean? He made a career of being a badass, and this time is no exception.
All right, Andrew. I don't know. Man, I'm gonna start going first from now on. I'm getting this. You guys stealing my thunder again every single time. Unbelievable. That's my number 3 was Tombstone. He plays Wyatt Earp. What can I say? Andrew just said everything that I was gonna say about the director, about Val Kilmer, about Bill Paxton, about Sam Elliott, about all of these guys. I mean, unbelievable, Andrew.
It wouldn't be the first time this has happened.
Yeah, I know. But no, I put Tombstone on I had to have Tombstone. It's one of my favorite Kurt Russell films, and like you said, I mean, if you're a Western fan, this is one of the. It's on my top 10 Westerns I've ever watched in my entire life. I just absolutely love Westerns. Kurt Russell's Wyatt Earp was great in this film. There's another Wyatt Earp film around the same time with Kevin Costner as Wyatt Earp, and also like Andrew said, Unforgiven was out. So they had like a little bit of a renaissance of Westerns in the early 90s because of Unforgiven, I would imagine, and Dances with Wolves. And then they slipped away again. Hopefully we're getting some more Westerns coming back of late. So hopefully Kurt Russell was actually in another Western not that long ago called Bone Tomahawk. But yeah, I had to have Tombstone on my list. But because of this wonderful relationship between Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, I decided to throw a curveball. What's your favorite Goldie Hawn film, Andrew?
Yeah, I got the for those of you out there in the internet land, Dan likes to throw these curveballs at us. So I got this message today, and I was like, "Oh, Dan, you crazy man! Goldie Hawn is one of the biggest blind spots in my viewing history, and I've only really seen one film with her, and that is 1975, I believe. It's Hal Ashby's Shampoo, which also stars Warren Beatty, and it's a film that is interesting in its role of in its gender roles and things of that nature. Because Warren Beatty essentially plays this hairdresser who's pretty much a ladies' man. He goes around and he sleeps with, I think, maybe every single woman he comes into contact with in this movie. And there is this perception, especially in movies and TV, is that male hairdressers are typically gay. But in this film, he's not. He is the manliest of men, being with all of these women. So it's an interesting kind of gender, not gender, but like stereotypical twist where the stereotype is kind of thrown out the window. And Hal Ashby was one of those directors who I think is one of the most underrated directors. He did some just phenomenal films throughout his career, specifically films like The Last Detail, Coming Home, Harold and Maude, and Being There are all just fantastic films. He had a great run in the 70s up into the 80s. So check out his work, but also check out Shampoo. If you want to see kind of an early younger Goldie Hawn before she became kind of a more household name in the 1980s.
Yeah, I forgot to start with Steven on this one, but I actually went to Andrew. But
it's okay. I had to get all that out first anyway.
It's okay. That wasn't my pick, so it's okay. I would say there's a couple that stand out. I'm just going to make a mention to Sugarland Express because it's Spielberg. But that's not my favorite of hers. My favorite is Death Becomes Her. Robert Zemeckis. It is a hilarious movie. It's Goldie Hawn, Meryl Streep, Bruce Willis. You have to check it out. These women basically make this deal to become immortal, and there's literally scenes where they fall down steps, their heads twist and they're still alive. It's just a weird movie. It's like in this Tim Burton era where everything was very dark and, pale people. But, Zemeckis, this is one of Zemeckis' kind of underrated films, I think. But yeah, it's a definite must see. It's a fun movie.
and I'm going to call BS on Andrew. You have not seen Death Becomes Her, Andrew?
No.
Are you kidding me? That's an absolute classic. You, Mr. Cinephile yourself, have never seen Death Becomes Her? Wow.
I've never seen Overboard. I've never seen Death Becomes Her. I haven't seen any lot of Goldie Hawn. It's just a blind spot in my viewing history.
We know, even though he hasn't seen these movies, he's seen a bunch of these foreign films that you've probably never heard of.
That's very true.
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking at her filmography right now, and nothing. I don't know why. It's just one of those things.
My pick was going to be Death Becomes Her, but because Steven picked it, I'm going to pick Sergeant Benjamin. And Sergeant Benjamin is a hilarious film. She is kind of like a problem child, and she kind of like goofing around, doing all these stuff, and she ends up in court, and they're like, you need to go and join the military. That's the only thing that's going to straighten you out. And so she gets in the military. Then they made a TV show. About Sergeant Benjamin after this. But this is a hilarious movie. You want to see Goldie Hawn at her peak of her career. This is her career, one of her best roles. It's not a great film. Don't get me wrong. It's funny though. It's funny. You got to put your brain aside, and it's a pretty funny movie. But yeah, I just wanted to do that little nod to Goldie Hawn since she's the wife of Kurt Russell. We're talking about Kurt Russell. We're gonna get back to Kurt Russell here. That's the reason why we're talking about. So let's get back to Steven. Back to the list. Top 5. What's your number 2, Steven?
My number 2 is one that I like, and this is Andrew has already done this one. It is one of my. I agree with him. It's super underrated. That's why it's so high on my list. I really put it high on my list because I think it's a very. There's only so many of these types of movies, and I think that this is maybe the best one, and that's Backdraft. I think Backdraft is definitely maybe the best firefighter film. Ron Howard directs the shit out of it. I think that the fire effects in this movie are just ridiculously awesome. They're just what they captured on film is crazy. And Kurt Russell in the movie just kind of plays you can say he plays a certain type in most of his movies, and he kind of does, but he's perfect for this role, a firefighter. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, America. Like that's America, firefighters. It coincides. And it's like he plays this veteran firefighter that's teaching Billy Baldwin, and just, but even in the scenes he's being charismatic, there's scenes where, spoiler, at the end he dies, and his death scene is so good. Like he's so good in that scene. And it's got a lot more going on in the movie other than just fighting fires. There's stuff about there's this, stuff going on about somebody's making money off of the deaths of firefighters. It's a very interesting movie. And, it's one that definitely needs to be rewatched again. People need to start watching this movie more because it's a great film, and Kurt Russell's really awesome in it. So, Backdraft, number 2.
And I didn't say anything earlier, but I knew Steven was going to have Backdraft on his list, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to put Backdraft on it. I didn't think Andrew was going to have it. That was a surprise, but I knew Steven wouldn't have it. So I said, you know what? I'm going to put Backdraft on my honorable mentions and save a spot for something else. It's a great film, Steven. I applaud you for loving that film so much because it really is a great film. Especially it's got Robert De Niro in it. That's great. Andrew. Andrew, all right, now you're making fun of me now, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Andrew, what is your number 2?
My number 2 can almost be flip-flop with number 1, or be 1A, 1B, but I'm going to go with John Carpenter's Escape from New York. It's a film that I've seen several times, and I really, really like it a lot. It's John Carpenter. It's the 1980s. It's a fantastic, fantastic score by John Carpenter. Really, all his films have just fantastic scores in them. And this is the film where he plays kind of one of his most popular, most well-known characters, and that is Snake Plissken, which is a really cool name for kind of this anti-hero, if you will. He's kind of a villain, kind of a good guy, but this film also has Lee Van Cleef, who was in a lot of the spaghetti westerns with Sergio Leone. It has the late Ernest Borgnine, as well as Donald Pleasance, who also worked with John Carpenter in previous films. Isaac Hayes is in the film. I mean, and Harry Dean Stanton, who is an underrated actor who's still in movies today, even though he's approaching an age that I can't even begin to understand how old he is. And this is a film that deals with a dystopian society and alternate reality to ours, if you will, where basically they decided to just turn New York, or I believe the island of Manhattan, into a prison, into just a prison city. Basically, they just put all of the prisoners into one place so that the rest of society doesn't have to deal with them, doesn't get affected by them at all. And basically, what happens is Snake Plissken has to go in and rescue the president, who I believe is portrayed by Donald Pleasance, who his plane crash lands in there. So it's a rescue mission. It's low budget. It's dystopian. It's a really unique film. And that's the one thing about John Carpenter's films. They were extremely unique. If you haven't watched John Carpenter's films, definitely check them out. But go into them with the idea that they are extremely 80s, definitely a lot of 80s stuff in there, kind of unique to that time period, the clothes, the style, everything. But yeah, I just have always really liked this film.
Once again, Andrew steals my thunder.
It's what I do. It's what I do. It's what I live for. I live for this.
I'm so getting sick of this, Andrew. I mean, I'm seriously thinking about going first from now on, because I'm getting a little fed up with this. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just glad that this is one of the reasons why Steve and Andrew are on this show. First of all, I can't get anybody else for the show, but that's another whole thing. These guys know what the hell they're talking about. That's why I love these guys. They know. They have the same taste as me in movies most of the time. And I got New York, Escape from New York is my number 2 as well. You know, the one thing you didn't mention, Andrew, was a lot of these kind of films at that time were like a Cold War. This is like an anagram for like Cold War. Escape from New York was, and there was like a bunch of films during that time that were coming out that were kind of like a amalgam of Cold War, a way to tell a kind of a Cold War type of storyline without being overtly obvious it's a Cold War thriller or something like that. And in the early 80s, we were technically still in the Cold War, even though Russia was basically bankrupt. I mean, their people were starving and everything. I mean, we didn't know that, but until years later. But they basically couldn't fight a war if they tried. They didn't have any freaking soldiers. They had all kinds of weapons, though. They had piles and piles of weapons that they couldn't use because nobody could use them. They didn't have enough people that were freaking alive. They were all starving to death. But that's another whole story. I don't know why I got into that. But yeah, I love Escape from New York. It's Snake Plissken. I mean, if you look back at some of the most iconic characters in movie history, this is one. You put like Rocky and Rambo and some of these types of characters, Snake Plissken is considered one of the most iconic characters in film history. Kurt Russell has been in arguably some iconic films. Obviously, we don't know what we're going to put on our top 5 and so forth, but this guy, that he has portrayed this character twice in Escape from LA, not as good. There's talk about another Escape movie. What they're going to do, I have no idea. What are they going to do? Escape from Seattle or something? I don't know.
Well, the word is they're talking about remaking it and doing a trilogy of movies with a new actor. It's not the same.
Ah, okay. See, that's why Steve's on here. It brings a little bit new information to a storyline that I brought up. So that's good. I'm glad to have you bring that up, Steven. But let's get into our.
Also, I heard Stargate got canceled because Emmerich's last movie, Independence Day Resurgence, sucked really bad and didn't make any money. So now they're like, no Stargate.
All right, well, that's good because that Stargate movie, and a lot of people like the shows on Sci-Fi Network, but that movie is, God, I just love Stargate. It's such a good movie. It just added so many cool things that, like, oh, Egyptians, space, planets, time travel, oh, cool. You know, plus Kurt Russell. All right, James Spader. That's it. All right, Stephen, what? Give me some honorable mentions.
Let me say this real quick. I know this is like I'm throwing that at you right now. How about we start doing honorable mentions at the end as a group instead of saying a bunch of things that might be on somebody's list?
All right.
Because we could do honorable mentions and somebody could get carried away with their honorable mentions and talk about a movie that might be somebody's number one.
All right, that's fine. That's no problem.
I never thought of that. That's a good idea.
So like when we've all set our number ones, then we can talk about some of the movies that together that. So yeah.
Okay, Stephen, good point. I appreciate you saying that. All right, what is your number one, Mr. Billings?
My number one. This is the one that I saw so many times. I still love watching it. It is, to me, one of the best buddy cop duos, and that is Tango and Cash. Tango and Cash is the shit. And nobody, if somebody tells you Tango and Cash sucks, well, they're stupid because Tango and Cash is one of the coolest buddy cop movies ever. You got Kurt Russell as Tango, and you got Sylvester Stallone as Cash. These two kind of like top cops in their area. Basically they're really not hitting the crime in their area, and the crime organizations are like, we got to do something about these two cops. So they set them up on a murder charge, and they both have to go to prison. And basically the idea is to, of course, eventually kill them in prison, or maybe not. They just keep them in prison for life, and so that they can go and do their bad guy stuff. So yeah, I mean, this movie is just. I mean, you got a scene where Stallone and Kurt Russell are in a shower together, and like that's worth it right there, right? There's a scene where they're in a boiler room and they're just taking on like a bunch of prisoners with like pipes and baseball bats. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, they go across electricity, power poles in the rain. I mean, like, come on. There's Terry Hatcher's in this movie back when she was like right around the time of Superman show. She was super hot. It has everything. In it.
Lois and Clark Adventures.
Yeah, Lois and Clark. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. This movie is just fantastic. 80s cheese. I don't even know if it might have came out in the 90s, but it came out in 89, the year I was born. That's another reason why it's great. It came out the year I was born. Yeah. Watch it.
Josh McCougar, he's one of these guys. He always is like talking about these 80s action films and these buddy comedies. And this is the time when Stallone and Kurt Russell got together. Stallone and Schwarzenegger were the big shots, and then Bruce Willis. But Kurt Russell is probably, if you had to put the big action stars of the 80s, obviously you got Van Damme and Seagal, but I put Kurt Russell as number 4 above Van Damme and Seagal because he's got better films than those bums. I mean, those two bums, pretty much their filmography compared to Kurt Russell's is nowhere close. So I put Kurt Russell as probably number 4 on the big action, the top big action stars of the 80s. And that's why I talked about before. He just does so many different things. He wasn't doing the same thing, and they really did gel together. Kurt Russell and Stallone really did gel together.
Kurt Russell almost took the role of Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon and turned it down. And actually Patrick Swayze almost played the Stallone character.
Wow.
But turned it down to do Roadhouse.
Oh, well, I mean, Roadhouse, God, I love Roadhouse.
Roadhouse is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course you can't think of anybody else in Lethal Weapon now other than Mel Gibson. I mean, he was great. And I forgot, I'm gonna have to bump Kurt Russell to 5, put Mel Gibson at 4.
Yeah, Mel Gibson's pretty badass. Yeah.
All right, Andrew, what is your number one? I think I know what it is, but I just want to hear you say it.
Yeah, my number one. There's a good chance this could be Dan's number one too. I mean, there seems to be a pattern developing here, but it is another John Carpenter movie, The Thing from 1982, starring, of course, the man we've just been talking about for almost an hour, Kurt Russell. I believe we've talked about this film before in an earlier episode or a couple of episodes, and it is one of the best horror movies I think of all time. For anyone who comes out and says, "Oh, the remake is never better than the original," or "the remake is never better than the original," or whatever one they want to phrase it, just throw this film in their face, hit them over the head with it if you have to, because this film is a remake of Howard Hawks's The Thing from Another World, and it is a fantastic movie. For those of you who don't know this movie, basically it's set in Antarctica, I believe, and there is essentially this alien thing that can transform into anybody and take over anybody's identity. And the idea is you don't know who that is, so it becomes very tenseful, and you're also secluded, so it's very claustrophobic. The practical effects in this film are incredible for the time. 1982 was very much a landmark year for just, I think, movies in general. You had films like Blade Runner came out that year, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, E.T., Poltergeist, the original Tron, Tootsie, Star Trek Wrath of Khan. I mean, 1982 was an amazing year for movies, and The Thing is right up there as one of the best to come out of that year. And I think it's one of the best work of John Carpenter, who he and Kurt Russell had seemingly a great relationship with. Other than Escape from L.A., which is not really a good movie. I think they made that sequel way too long afterwards. But he and John Carpenter had a great relationship with one another, and I wouldn't mind seeing a third, another team up for Kurt Russell and John Carpenter these days, because I think it would be cool to see kind of them come back together and make a movie, perhaps another Snake Plissken or something like that. But that's not The Thing. The Thing is a great movie. Check it out. If you're a fan of horror movies, it's a must watch. It's one of the best of all time.
And I did have The Thing on my list of horror movies. What was it? The horror movie episode. We talked about The Thing a couple of different times. And because of that, I thought to myself, you know what? I've talked about The Thing so much. And I absolutely love this film. Don't get me wrong. I really, really love. I wanted to shed some light on some of Kurt Russell's other films. And a film I was shocked that Andrew did not have on his list, a film that I know Andrew and Stephen, I think Stephen and Andrew both love. Kurt Russell plays a gentleman by the name of Herb Brooks. And he was basically a guy that was tapped to take over the United States hockey team in the 1980s. Once again, this Cold War kind of thing going on, where he gets a bunch of college kids that were kind of up-and-coming college hockey players, and he gets them to come and play for the United States hockey team. And they play the Russians and get killed by the Russians. But the name of the film is Miracle. So the film wouldn't be called Miracle, and the situation wouldn't be called a miracle if a miracle didn't happen. Al Michaels, one of the greatest calls in any sporting event of all time. Al Michaels has actually got a couple of the great sports calls of all time, but this is the one. And Herb Brooks is the coach, and Kurt Russell plays the coach. And wow, Miracle is one of the best sports movies of all time. If you're an American, you can't help but be like sucked into this story. It's such a great story about our country in a time when, during the Cold War, the Russians were unbelievable in hockey. A lot of the winter sports, the Olympics were their way of like, we're the best and so forth. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think Kurt Russell got nominated for an Oscar for playing Herb Brooks in this movie. I could be wrong, but I believe he did get nominated for an Oscar. He didn't win. I had to have Miracle on my list. I just think it's a great, great film, and it's different than a lot of his other films that he's been in. He's in comedies or he's in action films, but a real legitimate drama like this, he doesn't do a lot of these. And Silkwood, Miracle are two of the few legitimate dramas that he did. So I had Miracle, Herb Brooks as my number one. And because Steven decided he was going to change things up. So Steven, you got any honorable mentions?
Well, yeah, all the number ones are valid number ones, definitely. I kind of knew you were going to pick that, Dan, because you always pick the sports movie over anything. But I kind of was surprised nobody put Big Trouble in Little China on their list. I thought that would be a definite on somebody's. But, obviously some of the ones I didn't put on my list, and like I said, only because I felt like everybody else might pick it. Of course, Tombstone is awesome. Escape from New York is awesome. And, yeah, I mean, them are the two main ones that I left off just based on knowing that they were going to be talked about a lot. Of course, the Thing, like Dan said, we've talked about it a lot. I decided to keep that off the list just based off of that. And, yeah, I mean, dude's got a lot of cool stuff. There's also one called Dark Blue, which is like he plays like kind of a bad cop in the movie. Kind of feels like Training Day in a way. But it's a pretty good movie. It's not great, but it's pretty good. So that's a couple there.
All right, Andrew, you got a couple or comment on mine or whatever?
Yeah, a lot of people like Death Proof, the Quentin Tarantino film. Death Proof. A lot of people like him in that. The Hateful Eight, another Quentin Tarantino film. Bone Tomahawk, which is kind of an underrated Western horror. Kind of check it out if you're interested in kind of a mesh of genres. It's a weird movie. It's a very weird movie. Great cast though. Great cast.
Brutal.
Yeah, we mentioned them all. And a lot of things the others have mentioned. Stargate did kind of was kind of the foundation for the Stargate television series, which went on for a long time. Stargate SG-1, which if you like the Stargate movie, the TV show is I would say better than the actual movie. I mean, obviously it's limited with budget, but yeah, it's better than the actual movie. But yeah, I think we've covered a lot. There's a lot to cover. I think we covered most of his stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
go.
I did have Big Trouble, Little China on my honorable mention, Steven. I just, you just couldn't fit 7 films. I would have had The Thing or The Big Trouble. That's 7 films. You can't do 7 films when you're doing a top 5. But
well, I mean, knowing you, Dan, you would have come up with a reason to do, 7 for some reason. You've done it before, so.
I mean, I can't do that all the time. I can't cheat all the time. No, how about his character? We're talking about him because of Guardians of the Galaxy, but how about he's been in 2 of the Fast and Furious films, and he's really kind of cool in those films. We, think about Jason Statham and Vin Diesel and The Rock, but he kind of pops up at the most unopportune time. You don't expect him to pop up. He pops up, and he's got some decent lines of dialogue, and he's kind of cool. So we'll see if he's going to be in future Fast and Furious films. I don't know.
And we have, the reason why we're doing this episode this week is because of his him being in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And he's really good in that for the role that he plays. I thought he was very, very good. That's a great casting by James Gunn. James Gunn, I think, has done a fantastic job when it comes to casting both Guardians films.
Yes, and one more I just want to say came out last year that he was in called Deepwater Horizon. If you have not seen Deepwater Horizon, he's really good in that. He goes through an unbelievable transformation from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. I'm not going to get into it, but he goes through an amazing transformation in that film. I highly recommend Deepwater Horizon. And our panelists, I think, if I'm mistaken, I think our panelists would have brought up Deepwater Horizon. But you know what, Andrew, I forgot all about talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and I'm glad you said so. So, Steven, you got a quick synopsis or something you want to talk about Guardians before we get off the air?
Well, real quick, to make this interesting, I'm going to tell you a little bit of truth here. And don't spread this around because, well, I guess anybody could watch this. But I was a little bit under the influence while watching this movie, and not with alcohol. So yeah, this experience of this movie was very interesting for me. I'm going to go see it again tomorrow, but some of this movie was a blur, especially the first half. But I do remember it. I do remember the movie. I just don't know if I saw the same things everybody else did. But I will say I thought it was hilarious. I thought the comedy was maybe even better than the first movie for me. And, you know, I don't think the story this movie was a lot less based around a great plot, but it was more based around building the characters more, which is what I want to see in a sequel is to take the characters in new places and let them grow. And specifically Star-Lord. Star-Lord grows a lot more in this movie because, of course, and this isn't a spoiler because it's in the trailers, you know, meeting his father, you know, so, you know, that's the best things about the movie. Does it lack in some story elements? Sure, yes. It's not as interesting of a story all around, and it might be a tad too long. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes long. I would say they go a little bit overboard at that, but and you know, I know that this movie was also shot in a very high. It was shot in like 8K or something. It was shot like a very high resolution. And I could tell. I don't know that if I liked it or not, but then again, like I said, I was under the influence. So I'm going to give it another look and see if I feel differently. But yeah, all in all, I really enjoyed the movie. I don't know that it was better than the first one, but I did think it was really hilarious, and definitely can't wait to see it again tomorrow. So,
all right, Andrew, thoughts?
Yeah, I did see the film as well. And a lot of what Steven said, the film is more about character, less about plot, which is kind of the opposite of the first film. But I found myself enjoying the film a lot. It's an extremely fun time at the cinema. But I would say the middle of the film kind of gets stuck in neutral a little bit when it comes to plot and things actually happening. It felt like it's just a comedy at times. We're just getting a lot of jokes and a lot of situational humor, things like that, which is fine. It's entertaining as hell. But what really makes up for a lot of that lacking plot is that third act, that climax of the film, I think is incredible. Like, there's a point when once it ends, it's nonstop and it's heartfelt and it's awesome. And yet again, like Steven said, the visuals in this film are so bold and gaudy, and it's interesting that he brings up it being shot in a higher resolution because it felt so visually gorgeous that I couldn't help but notice the extra detail and the pop in the screen. Definitely see this with the best projectors and the biggest screen you possibly can. If you can see it in IMAX, I bet you it looks incredible, and it's probably like one hell of an experience. But yeah, it's a good sequel. It's one of the most bold films in the MCU, which I think has gotten kind of formulaic at times. It's bold when it comes to prioritizing character over plot, and kind of dropping a lot of Easter eggs and being not afraid to really go out there and be very cosmic with the MCU, and I really appreciated that. And I appreciate that James Gunn has been given that freedom to do so.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I saw it in 3D, and it was a bright, colorful movie. Gold people looked golder. I mean, just everything was like, Yondu looked bluer. I mean, what's Zoe Saldana's character? She looked greener. You know, everything just looked brighter, more colorful, more just. So if I was high, world am I in? Oh my God, I'm fucked up here, man. This is crazy. No,
It's not how it went down, but okay.
Okay. No, but the characters, you're absolutely right, guys. This is a character building movie. These relationships between like Drax and Mantis and Medusa and Gamora and Star Lord and Ego, the Living Planet. These were relation Yondu and Rocket, you know, and basically Groot was there to baby Groot was there just as like a plot device for him to go do this, to get the plot moving on this way and going this way, or don't do this or whatever. But it really had the relationships of these characters which got you to really care about these characters more. Specifically Yondu, I really enjoyed. The Gamora and Nebula relationship was really interesting. You know, some of the stuff that happened because obviously Thanos is Nebula and Gamora's father. Some of the stuff there. This race of people called the Sovereign, you know, they come out of nowhere. You know, yeah, are they in the comics? Sure they are. But they explore them in an interesting way in this movie, which, you know, okay, that's interesting to bring such a, you know, small type of character into the movie, which from the comics are like, okay, all right, then boom, you actually kind of enjoy them, and they're all distinct. Each one of these like gold people are all distinct, and it's very interesting. And the main ones played by Elizabeth Debicki. But the Ravagers had a lot of interesting. There was a lot of character building with the Ravagers, with the freaking Ravagers of all people. How could they develop characters with these people? You know, and that's I think James Gunn really had an idea of where he was going with this script, and that's the thing that really stands out the most. The songs aren't as good as the original, the first film, but the script and the character building, and that and the direction of this film, and that goes to what a great job James Gunn did. I give all the credit. Yeah, obviously he's the director. The director's going to get the credit or not the credit, but I think he did a great job in this film, and I'm looking forward to his third film in this trilogy, and I can't wait to see what he does next. Obviously, it's going to be something different than the first one and the second one. So I don't think he's going to go for the same thing over and over and over again. So he's going to try something different with the third one, I think. And I can't wait to find out. I really enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy 2. But like Steven said, it's not as good as the first one, but it's like slightly less. It's not like a big gap less. It's just like slightly less as good as the first Guardians of the Galaxy. There's a lot in this film to like, and I definitely recommend it for people out there. All right, next week, because of King Arthur, we're gonna do kind of like a historical thing where movies set in history. It doesn't have to be kind of history, but it has to be set in some kind of like historical backdrop or historical time, like let's say World War II or the King Arthur, like the Crusades or the Roman times, or something that has a specific backdrop of history to it.
Well, what about we name it epic films? You know, like that's kind of more what you're talking about, I think. You know,
Film epics.
You know, like things like Kingdom of Heaven, or
no, absolutely right. Yeah.
Like big movies like that are like, you know, Lawrence of Arabia, or like these are epics.
Historical epics.
Historical epics.
Yeah, that's not a bad one. That's a good one. Because King Arthur, that's what's coming out in Snatched. You know, we already talked about our favorite Goldie Hawn film, so we're gonna eliminate Snatched out of there, and we're gonna do historical epics next week. It's gonna be interesting to see what the panel, you know, decides is a historical epic. It's going to be interesting to see. the choices. There's a lot of films out there to choose from, so this will be a fun topic next week. But before we go, Andrew, where can you be found?
You can find me on Twitter at Cabzilla06 and on my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions.
And Steven, where can you be found?
You can find me on Film Club Central. I am the host of the Film Club Movie Show. We do episodes every other week. This coming week, we just got done with the voting, and in a couple, we're going to be talking Aliens. You got Alien Covenant coming out in a couple weeks. We're going to be talking Aliens. And if you missed it, this past week, we just released our last episode, which was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Had a lot of fun talking that. So go look for that.
Yeah, I got to watch that Raiders. I keep forgetting to watch that. I got to go back and watch that episode. You can always find me at Dan Skipbound on Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, or at From the Fourth Row. Steven's like making fun because you can find me in all these different places because I'm everywhere. Also, my podcast, we just put up an episode this past week, The Best Damn Movie Show, where I co-host with my co-host, Vincent Laspada. And we have 5 episodes of the 52 must-see movies, and where you can find them. Actually, Andrew and Steven are in more episodes than me right now, but that's going to change very soon. We have 5 episodes up, so if you want to learn about classic films and why they are essential as some of the greatest films of all time, please go to the Best Damn Movie Show YouTube channel and look at these episodes. We break down some of the greatest films of all time or some of the most essential films of all time. And every week we put a new episode up. So for myself, Andrew, and Steven, good night.
And Groot.